I read that the so-called Reverend William Barber, director of the North Carolina NAACP, described minorities who support conservative causes as mouthpieces. They frantically seek out people of color to become mouthpieces for their particular agenda. You know who answered the call for a particular agenda? People like William Barber. I'll remind you of what the Democrat Margaret Sanger said. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the ministers is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Willie, you're one of those ministers who also answered the call of LBJ's particular stated agenda. And I quote, to have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Maybe we can get the truth into this guy if we wrote it on a box of donuts or something.
I think what's happening. Propaganda.
Seek us out? Really? And what is it that the Republicans are giving us to rope us in? Government cheese? Peanut butter? Government housing? Free abortions? Food stamps? Promises of free health care? Free cell phones? Welfare checks? Minimum wage? Dang! The Republicans don't try to buy us with none of this stuff that the Democrat Party has bought the black community off with. You Democrats are constantly saying that the Republican Party does nothing for black people. So what is it that the Republicans are offering us? The Republican Party ain't giving a bunch of blacks nearly as much as the Democrat Party has stolen from others to buy the loyalty of the black community. Let me explain something to you. If a black person is a Republican, it's because we've thought about what it means to be a Republican. We're not Republican because, oh, well, because my family has been a Republican, so I'm a Republican too. No, usually our families are mostly Democrats who will cuss you out for being a Republican. So if you're gonna be a Republican, you better really think it over. We were Republican before anybody had to seek us out or offer us anything. We're Republican because we know the people's God's given rights need to be protected from people like you. I'll remind you, the reason why the Republican Party doesn't have all the minorities in it that you think we should have is because you scare minorities out of wanting to be Republicans. You ridicule the idea of them wanting to be a Republican. You even make threats. It's not Republicans that keep minorities out. It's you. And again, make up your mind. You curse the Republican Party for not being all diverse, yet when it's shown that the Republican Party is populated with people of color, you're still mad. You don't want racial strife to end. You liberals feed off of it. You want people to hate each other, and you especially want people to hate Republicans. Republicans were already ahead of the curve in trying to end racism in America and fought the racist Democrats from the 1860s through the 1960s. Well, the Democrats changed their tactics. They've never stopped being racist. They just found another way to benefit off racism and make it socially acceptable. And among the ways for Democrats to make their bigotry socially acceptable is to act like they're so progressive and abhor racism. But it's totally okay to be a bigot against people of color who are Republicans, which technically isn't new, because that same dynamic existed when the Republican blacks were harassed by the Democrat KKK. Another way Democrats have made bigotry socially acceptable for themselves is with projection. All a Democrat has to do is express the bigotry they really feel and say, well, that's what Republicans think. And there you go. Republicans are left with the stigma of what a Democrat really thinks. And the person who made that tweet concerning a biracial family is just another example of some low-life racist who's too much of a coward to face it and tries to lay it on Republicans. It's 2014, and liberals still keep trying to make this an issue, and they call themselves progressives. Progress from what? MSNBC firing somebody, again, is nothing more than damage control, which is totally different than self-control, which liberals have very little of. Like I said, liberals want to control everything. They want birth control, gun control, population control. They want to control everything from the airwaves to the weather. They want to control everyone and everything except themselves. They said they're sorry, sure, but they're not repentant. The reason why MSNBC is having to make these series of apologies is because they haven't changed their worldview. And they can't advance their worldview without racism. They are dependent on racism, race baiting, and racial strife to advance their worldview. So the Republicans, don't be discouraged. The left is going to do everything they can to keep their shackles on the black community. And unfortunately, the left is going to get a lot of help from the very people they've shackled. Harriet Tubman saw the same thing. She said, I freed 1,000 slaves, and I would have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves. You're gonna get rejected. You're gonna get ridiculed, vilified, cursed, even threatened. But not everyone is hardwired. You may not convince some, but others will take notice. And chances are their perception of you will change as they see that during the course of limited exchanges, the real hostility and bigotry comes from the Democrat Party. When I say limited, I mean you gotta know when to stop casting pearls before swine. Not only will they trample on pearls, you'll end up losing the high ground and end up in the mud with them. While the others that you could have reached will just see two mud-covered pigs. But what's more ideal is that they'll see that it's not Republicans that have been trying to seek out people of color with a cheap bribe at the forced expense of somebody else. They'll see that all along that it's been the Democrats rounding up people of color. So I ask again, how are the Republicans seeking us out? What's their bait? What's the attraction? We're gonna get ridiculed, cussed at, alienated by our friends and family. We're not gonna get those government-issued goodies that the Democrats suckered much of the black community with. What is it that you think the Republicans are offering the black community to seek us out with? The Republican platform offers the protection of something you liberals don't understand: independence. Democrats don't offer the protection of independence. The Democrats offer dependency. Oh, Democrats may think that they're all about being independent and whatnot, but their policies are based on dependency. See, the Republicans don't have to offer us anything. They don't have to seek us out. We had already arrived. Democrats have long been afraid of that. Now their new tactic is to try to ridicule Republicans for supposedly now trying to open up the tent to people of color when it was never the Republicans keeping them out. It was Democrats keeping people of color from going in. Now don't get me wrong. I know there's some Republicans that try certain patronizing tactics to keep their office, but that's not the Republican way. They're being deviant. But for Democrats, you're just following your model. I'm Alfonso Rachel with Zonation, and I'm sure some Republicans can see what I'm talking about when I say liberals are trying to control how people perceive you. And they'll even stoop as low as to project the bigotry they feel about a little girl and her interracial parents in a cereal commercial onto you. Government cheese?